If you're married and it makes sense for you to be doing Roth conversions as part of your tax planning, part of your comprehensive financial planning, does it matter which spouse's IRA you do the Roth conversion from? Well, what if there's an age gap? Does that make a difference? I've got a great question from a fan of the show, that scenario and more coming up. My wife and I, we've been married, it'll be 20 years later this year. We are 4 years apart in age. I don't know, that feels normal. I don't know what average is. She's more mature than I am, that's for sure. It has always been that way. But a 4-year age gap, I've always just viewed us as, yeah, that's normal. And I probably think it is, but it hasn't really impacted our planning much, right? At this stage of life, a 4-year age difference really hasn't impacted anything. However, I'll be turning 50 before she does, and that means, I'll be able to do catch-up contributions before her. I'll obviously, as we get closer to retirement, I'll be turning 65 well before she does, so Medicare and different insurance then. We've always been on a group family plan, and that would be different, right? So I'd be on Medicare first. Of course, I'd be eligible for Social Security first, could impact our Social Security decisions. And so this 4-year age gap may be normal or normal-ish. It hasn't really influenced our planning right now. It will in the future. Well, got a great question regarding this specific scenario and a common tax planning strategy, the Roth conversion, one that we love, that I love. Great question here from Esther. Here's what she asked. In the 22% tax bracket, planning to do a Roth conversion in 2026 and will likely remain in the same tax bracket during retirement due to pensions and Social Security. We're married filing jointly. There's approximately a 10-year age gap between us, with the older spouse who's retired currently age 65. Would it be preferred to convert the traditional IRA of the younger spouse or the older spouse? Please highlight the pros and cons of each. What a fantastic question. We get into this all the time, right? And it's common to have an age gap, and it's common to implement and come up with different tax planning strategies and need to decide, well, listen, does it make sense to do, the older person's IRA or the Roth? So fantastic question. And the pros and cons are essentially mirror images of each other, right? A pro in one scenario is a con in the other and vice versa. So let's dive into those pros and cons, and then I'll tell you sort of what I would do. Scenario one of if you do the Roth conversion for the older spouse. The obvious advantage, the obvious pro is that it's going to reduce the required minimum distribution, and they're going to face their required minimum distribution, their RMDs much, much sooner, right? Because they're 10 years older. At age 65, they still have a few years, right? All the way, their RMDs won't start until 73. They've got a few years before RMDs will start. And if they're doing Roth conversions for this older spouse, that should greatly limit their required minimum distribution and should give them a lot more flexibility. So that's a clear positive. Depending on how they structure it, another positive could mean that could give them some benefits with the taxation of Social Security. Again, because of a 10-year age gap, it's likely that this older spouse is going to be drawing Social Security much sooner. I don't know what the rest of their tax picture looks like, but if they do Roth conversions, that will obviously impact the taxation of Social Security. But depending on how big the account is over the long term, that could make the taxation of their Social Security a little bit better. And then it also clarifies sort of estate planning, right? The older spouse, if you're converting their dollars when those transition, if they go to the surviving spouse, if they're the primary beneficiary, then they can make them their own. But if they go on to other family members, it's more tax efficient. So there's some estate planning clarity. But the primary pro of doing the Roth conversion for the older spouse is that you get to limit future RMDs, and future RMDs are much closer. The con, though, what you give up by converting the older spouse is you've got less time for the dollars to land in the Roth and grow tax-free. And that is the name of the game with the Roth, is how long can you get the maximum amount of money growing tax-free for your financial future. And so that's the significant con. No one's promised tomorrow. We don't know life expectancy, that sort of thing. But just presuming 10 years older means 10 years less time for those dollars to grow tax-free. Yes, you would say, but if they are inherited by the spouse, then the spouse would take them over. I get that as well. But those are the pros and cons of converting the older spouse. Again, it's sort of a mirror opposite, if you will. So if you go with option 2 and convert the IRA of the younger spouse, the big advantage is that you maximize the time, even more time for those dollars to grow tax-free. Again, like I just mentioned with the con for doing the older spouse, technically that may not matter if the spouse is the primary beneficiary. You'll get sort of the both life expectancies for those dollars to grow tax-free. But that's the primary advantage, the primary pro of converting the younger spouse. The con, though, then is that you'll need to navigate, well, when RMDs start for the older spouse in just 8 years or whatever it is, then yeah, it's that could cause a wrinkle in your tax planning. That's going to be the primary con. So sort of mirrored images of each other's pros and cons. What are some other factors in their financial situation here from Esther that she gave that are missing that really need to be considered in order to make a fantastic decision here? One is account size, right? I'm assuming it would be very extraordinary for both spouses to have the accounts in their name be the exact same size. And oftentimes, even though you'd say, well, they're married, so isn't it all their money? Yes, but the I in IRA stands for individual. And if one person has a much smaller IRA than the other, and you can convert it all within a certain period of time and completely get rid of RMDs, that may make a lot of sense. But so understanding and knowing the account sizes, that would matter. Knowing their health and their health history. Again, no one's promised tomorrow. And if we knew what the future held, we could make a perfect plan. But again, like if you're debating between convert older spouse or convert younger spouse, well, if older spouse has a sketchy health history and has some challenges there, then that might influence one way or the other. In a widower type situation, now you wouldn't have joint tax rates, you'd have single tax rates, and so that could accelerate that. I'd like to know the rest of their tax picture. They mentioned that they're in the 22% tax bracket, expect to be there into retirement, but that leaves a little bit of ambiguity on, well, what are we assuming for Social Security, and then how close are you to the IRMA tax brackets, the IRMA limits for Medicare surcharges? Because of the age gap, it's very possible you'll want to convert a lot more, even if you happen to trip the IRMA bracket. And I wouldn't want to do that. I'm not recommending that, but I'd just be curious so that if you tripped it in 1 year and projecting out, could that mean you'd avoid the IRMA bracket, in the future forever? And then, one other thing, we talk about this a lot on the Wise Money Show, is where a lot of people do get excited about doing Roth conversions. You might not want to convert too much, because if you're charitable, you can do qualified charitable distributions starting at age 70 and a half, pulling money out of your IRA, not paying any tax on it, and having it go to charity. So those are just a few of the other circumstances. There's more, but other kind of circumstances that would be helpful to weigh in and make a wise choice. Because ultimately, the Esther laid out the question, and it's already like, you've already won. You're already clear that, yeah, at this stage, early in retirement, and with this age gap, that it makes sense to do Roth conversion, so let's do it. You've already won. But there's just a few other circumstances that would influence, well, would it make a little bit more sense for the older or the younger? So here's my take. Here's how I would answer. My default is I like to convert the IRAs of the younger spouse. That's the default. Without knowing any of those other details that I said would really be essential to make a great call, make a wise choice, I default to converting the younger because I want to maximize the amount of time that those dollars can grow tax-free. Yes, if it's inherited by the spouse, then it's still going to expand for both lifetimes, but they could change those rules. You don't know. And obviously, the size of the IRAs, if the RMD for that older spouse is going to create a huge wrench in things, that could change things. But my default is I want to maximize the amount of time that the account can grow tax-free, and therefore my default is the younger spouse. However, here's what I would do. I would build out that 5-factor retirement plan, the one that we talk about all the time, that 5-factor retirement plan, and look out at future years to say, what does your tax picture look like? what dollars are being pulled from where, what does RMD look like, what does life look like, each year moving out in the future. And of course, that's just a projection. Reality will be different, but this gives you a perspective so that you can make decisions today. So one, building out that 5-factor retirement plan, but then combining that with a multi-year tax projection. I would want to lay it out. I basically, again, you guys know I'm a nerd, so I wouldn't just make an on-the-spot guess. My on-the-spot is I like converting the younger spouse, but I would actually build it out. And I know our planning team would as well. They want to see the details of, all right, what would it look like? How much would we convert this year in 2026, next year in 27, and in 28, 29? What does that do to other tax benefits and senior deductions, those sorts of things? And then what does that do after, like by the time the older spouse reaches 73 and RMD age, what does RMD look like? How does that influence things? I would build that out and have it all on one spreadsheet, or we use different software to look and say, well, what's the impact? And that would help us drive. That would help us drive the conviction of, no, it totally makes sense to convert the younger spouse, totally makes sense to convert the older spouse. But without all of that, I would lean on kind of my biases converting the younger spouse. So if that's you, Esther, or for those of you that are in a similar situation, I want you to have that clarity and the confidence of running the miles. We've done the analysis and we know exactly, of these two really good options, we know exactly which one's the best option because we've built that 5-factor plan, have that multi-year tax projection, work with your certified financial planner on that. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or give us a call, 574-247-5898. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.